Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 206 of the Nope Coach podcast, When to Persevere. I'm your host, Suzanne Culberg. So, I am an avid reader. I don't know if I've discussed this on the show before, but I usually whip through at least 2 fiction books a week. And it's funny, for me, that feels like a lot. I know some of my listeners who I chat to read much more than that. And for other people, they're like 2 books a week. How do you find the time? Anyway, today's topic, when to persevere. I'm currently reading Iron Flame. So that is a sequel to a book that I think came out last year called The Fourth Wing and was like a sensation. I smashed The Fourth Wing in one afternoon. I read 2 books a week. I'm actually a speed reader, so I can whip through them really fast. But, making that time to sit down and get through it. Anywho, loved that book, highly anticipated the sequel, opened it up, could not get into it. Like, I was just like, this is so disappointing. Eagerly anticipated, been waiting all year, had it on pre-order, it's ready. Oh my gosh, make the time, clear my schedule, sit down. I'm like, this feels like wading through molasses. And it's such a great thing to consider, like when to persevere, because especially with the book, you never know after you've established the characters or that beginning re-established in the case of a sequel, sometimes it can get really good. And sometimes you can be like, the author just didn't hit it for me this time. And that's the other thing too. Often when it's an author that you love and you've read one or more, like there was another series called, I think the first one was called Crave by Tracy Wolff. Once again, first book, could not put it down. Second book, not quite as good as the first, but got through it. Third one was like, ooh. Fourth one was a did not finish. And there's at least one more in the series. But, how do you know when to persevere? And I'm talking about something, reading a book, which, is not that big of a deal in the scheme of things. You can put it down. There's millions of others. But, it's a metaphor for however many areas of our life. When do you start a career and persevere through the initial slog because it's going to get good? Or when do you know, actually, this just isn't for me? And this question, unfortunately, there's no universal answer, tick box, checklist. Someone can just tell you. A lot of it, it's sitting with it for yourself. When I went to medical school, within the first couple of weeks of first year, it just wasn't for me. Didn't float my boat, wasn't. And I remember speaking to my parents about it, and they're like, but you've worked so hard to get here. Persevere. You're just a student now. It will be different when you start seeing patients, when, sometimes you have to go through a bit of not great stuff to get to a good thing. And that's sound and solid advice. And I remember getting through my first year and then my second year and then starting at the hospital and on the wards and stuff, more so in third year, still, it wasn't calling my heart, didn't feel like a wonderful thing. And then at that point, it's like, oh, but you've spent 2 years already. Like, if you hang on for another 2, you'll get a degree. Because in Australia, at least at that time, at the 4th year, you got your Bachelor of Medical Science, and then 6th year, Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery. So sticking through those next 2 years to get, that piece of paper because I've spent that time. And then being like, just more and more and more evidence that this isn't for me. This isn't the thing. And knowing when to listen to that inner gut feeling and follow the call of your heart versus listening to others, as well-meaning as they may be, giving you advice that just isn't aligned for you. So in the end, I left medical school halfway through my 5th year. And I know that that was a big shock and surprise to a lot of people. You only had 18 months to go. It was so close. I was so close to what? A second piece of paper? Like, there's, the way I look at things, there's 3 currencies: time, energy, and money. I had already spent a considerable amount of money, going to medical school. That money was a sunk cost. I had spent a lot of energy. Like, that is one tough course. And a lot of time. I didn't need to continue to spend those things to know that this wasn't right for me. The same when back to the book example, which is something much lighter. I've already spent the money, like invested in the book, obviously a lot less than a medical degree, but the money's a sunk cost. Do I want to continue spending the time and the energy to wade through this for when it gets good? And sometimes you can be richly rewarded, and sometimes you're like, there's a couple of hours of my life I won't get back. But are you willing to invest that and see? So one of my friends who sends me the best reels from like all those what are they called? TikTokers, book talk? I don't know. I don't follow a lot of that stuff. I don't need to. I have people who curate it for me. Thank you so much. Anyway, I mentioned that I was struggling with Iron Flame, and she's like, no. Yeah, I know the beginning is slow, but persevere because it gets really good about halfway through. And I've literally just gotten past the halfway mark and the action's really starting to ramp up. And I'm like, oh my goodness, better record this show because otherwise the rest of the day will be sunk in finishing that book. So all of this to say, when you're looking at whatever it is, a book to read, something trivial, a career, or a relationship, or whereabouts you live, like the big, deep things in life, it is a pause about, am I going to persevere with this? Is this going to get better? Is this going to be worth it in the end? Am I going to get past this point and then have, let's say, smoother sailing? Because no one can ever guarantee smooth sailing. Or is this just not for me? And if it's just not for you, that's okay. That frees you up to be able to find something that you are passionate about. I think one of the biggest disservices we give ourselves is we don't truly go for something, and then we spend so much of our life thinking, I could have been somebody. I could have been a contender. Speaking of books, Patrick Stewart mentioned that movie in his book, which I laughed because that line always sticks in my head. I can't remember the name of the movie, but I'm sure somebody will know it. But, all that to say, instead of thinking coulda, shoulda, woulda, give the thing a go and then be okay with, actually, perhaps this wasn't for me. Because then you're not always wondering, you're not thinking, what could have happened had you made a different choice, that this thing isn't for you. And then from there, new pathways are opened up for things that you may want to follow through with. This can be in life, this can be in business. So many things we do in business, like, making a podcast, for example. If it doesn't do well initially, do you persevere, or do you be like, actually, podcasting isn't for me. I want to write a book. I want to write a blog. I want to do TikTok dance reels. I don't personally ever want to do TikTok dance reels, but you do you. But when you give something a go and you stick with it long enough, and then you get to decide, is this for me? Is this worth the effort and the energy and the time put in? Or it's just not my thing. Anyway, I'd love to hear what that's opening up for you, because, do you have something in mind, an inner gauge, an inner checklist where I will persevere? So for me, with books, if it's a brand new author, I'll give them 2-3 chapters maybe, and otherwise I'm out. If it's somebody, especially a series that I have really enjoyed, I'll give them, obviously, as the Iron Flame shows, half a book. But, only you get to know and decide and judge that. Thank you for tuning in. I would love to invite you to check out my program, Why Wait? We talk about all sorts of things beyond books, though that does happen. I am totally a book fan. Side note, so when I finish Iron Flame, Murtagh, so for anyone who read the Eragon series, the person has released a book, I don't know, it must be like 20 years later, diving into that next. Caldorus, if you've read is it Arcanier? Pronunciation's not my thing, and I run an audio show. The irony is not lost on me, but by Lynette Noni. She's an Australian author. Absolutely love that series. Once again, a book that's come out a number of years later that's tied to that. And A Fire in the Flesh, Jennifer L. Armentrout. If you haven't checked her out, I absolutely love all of her books. Once again, very first one in the series, started to read it. I was like, so a couple of chapters in, and all of her books I can't put down. So, the podcast, if it is slowing down over the coming weeks, it's like Suzanne's on a reading bend. Anyway, check out my program, Why Wait? Besides good book recommendations, we talk about the things that I talked about in this episode, when to persevere, when to take action towards the goals, when to stop, when to reevaluate, and making yourself a priority today, not one day, not when everything else is done, but today. Because what are we waiting for? We're so often like, I'll do this after Christmas, after New Year, after the kids go to school, after all this. And we're perpetually waiting. Why wait is about reclaiming that, but not by going all in, not boot camp style, not go hard or go home. Because trust me, I'm an introvert. I'd rather stay home. But taking small, dedicated action towards your goals on the daily, learning how to set boundaries, learning how to say no to others so that you can say yes to yourself in an absolutely fabulous community. The next cohort is kicking off January 2nd. So be sure to check that out, SuzanneCulberg.com. I hope to see you there. Thanks for listening or watching. Catch you on the next one. Bye for now.